Hey guys, thanks for joining me on another one of my painting tutorials. In this video it kind of follows directly on from my last one, which was the painting yellow cloth, and in this video we're going to be painting magenta cloth. So this is for my regiment of Vostroyans. This is a figure I painted quite a while ago, and their uniform is half yellow and half magenta. And when I came back to paint these guys after quite a lengthy break, I completely forgot how I used to paint the colours. So the new figures are slightly different to the older ones, but I thought actually I can correct this with a video moving forward. I'm going to start off for the magenta with a layer of Mephiston Red. Now you could use corn red, red gore, anything that's a dark red. Now the only reason I'm doing this is because I've started with a black base coat, and the only reason I've done that is because this army was painted quite a while ago and all the figures so far have had a black base coat, so I'm just following suit. If I was going to do this from scratch, I probably would have done a grey undercoat and then maybe skipped this first step. It really depends. Again, I'm just sort of trying to copy the existing work. So not too much to it with this first stage. I just want to go around and paint all the areas that will be magenta with the Mephiston Red, and I've got to be somewhat careful on this second video painting these guys because I've got to try and split the uniform in half like that. So yeah, really nothing to it. I'm just going to go ahead, make sure the camera's in focus, and paint all of these guys red. So I'll see you in a sec. There we go. So with the red done, I can move on to what is the first magenta layer. And if you had have picked maybe a grey undercoat, as I said, you potentially could have missed the red stage depending on what magenta you've got. Now, this coat of arms, this is the company that made the Citadel paints when I was growing up, and I've kept a few of them sort of like in stock because I quite like the shade. So again, I don't really know the magentas in the current Games Workshop line. No, it's terrible. This is a painting tutorial and I can't tell you the right paints, but in fairness, a magenta will do the trick. So the difference here is this paint is a little bit thinner than the Citadel paints, so you need quite a number of layers. If you were using this, you know, hopefully I can get it in focus for you closer. There we go. So you can see with this, it really doesn't have much of an effect over the red at all. It's just how thin this paint is. So if I were you, I would pick a magenta in the current lineup. And really what I'm going to do here, oh, I've lost focus again. There we go. What I'm going to do here is probably 2 layers of this. Right. It dries a little bit better. But I'm going to go through all of this, cover all the bits that I've done red in this magenta, and as I said, once I've done the 10, I'm going to circle back to the first guardsman and go through them again and put that second coat on. So bear with me a moment. There we go. That's 2 coats of the Warlock Purple, the old coat of arms paint over the original, what was it, Mephiston Red. If it was the Citadel paints you wanted to use, I've had a quick look into it, and either Screamer Pink or Pink Horror look like a close approximation. Again, entirely up to you, really. It has the same effect in the long run, just be slightly different shade. The next step, very, very simple. We want to apply a wash of Carroburg Crimson. Any red wash will do. This one's a nice one because it's slightly on the pinkier purple side anyway, and I don't really want to like drench the figure with this. I just want to sort of apply an even layer over them. There we go. Yeah, it's not really making a huge amount of difference, but that's kind of the point. You want sort of subtle changes. And this side of the cloth isn't the greatest example because it's not really going to pull anywhere because it's all sort of flat. Let me see if there's a guy with an elbow crease somewhere where you can see. Maybe this one here might give you a better view of what we're trying to do. So if I can bring it into focus, there we go. So it's kind of, yeah, again, it's just giving the model some depth. So yeah, go through, apply a red wash over. I'm going to do this, won't take me too long, and I'll see you in a tick. There we go. Yeah, no time at all really on that one. And you can see it's more of a deep wine, red wine sort of colour at the moment. The next step is to go back to your magenta or pink or purple, whatever you've kind of got to hand there and what you're using. And we now want to start painting in the motion in the cloth almost, right? So here again, this one is really difficult, these models, because on the yellow side you can see there's got some lovely folds and flow in the fabric, and on the other side not so much. So let me go back to my, you know what, this guy might be useful because they've got some folds in the side. So I can kind of see how this bit you might start off thick and then move it and pull the brush thinner, thick, and then pull it thinner. Again, because my magenta is really thin, it's not having an obvious effect immediately, but it's basic highlighting really. You want to pick out the raised areas, leave the other bits and pieces, and I'm going to keep doing this until there's some sort of like definition. So really what we want to do is in the lower recesses where the red wash has started to pull, I'm leaving that alone. I'm picking out the other bits. Again, this is another stage where you might be doing this thinking, I'm not really seeing much change, but it will get there in the end. We're just building up those subtle changes between each layer, and I think it works in the end. So let's focus again. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to pick out all the details in this magenta. In some places, because of how thin this paint is, I might do it a second time, and then I will catch you in a sec. There we are. Not a great deal of difference between this stage and the last. I mean, if you're using one of the Citadel magentas, there might be a bigger difference than what's on the screen right now. But you can see here in that sort of part of his coat that's turned up, the recesses are the darker shade, and the highlighted bits are the lighter colours. Now I want to go and mix together the magenta that you've possibly been using with an ivory. So I'm using Screaming Skull, as I always call it, bleach bone, and I prefer to use an ivory to highlight existing shades over a white, because I feel it gives it more of a natural colouring. As you can see, my Screaming Skull is on its last legs, but there'll be enough in here just to get us through this. So what was the ratio? He says I can't quite remember what my ratio was, so we'll figure it out now. Let's just move that into the bottom view there, and with the magenta, let's try and mix these together. So that there, if you can tell, that's far too light. That would be the colour that I would use in the next stage when I'm trying to highlight things up. So let's get a big old daub in there. Wash that, because I don't really want the paint all over the bristles. Right. What have we got now? Is that still too light? I can always make it lighter. So what did that end up being? That was like almost 3 parts magenta, 1 part Screaming Skull there, wasn't it? So there we go. That's the sort of ratio we're aiming for. And again, just like in the previous stages, I want to try and highlight the edges of the cloth. So let's try and get that in as good a focus as I can. And I'm trying to go to the top of this now and flick it upwards. Right, so the top of the fold, try and flick it up like that. Right, so that's kind of what I'm going for there. I might try and make this a little bit darker, because now there's quite a difference. Lost focus. There's quite a difference between the previous and the last step, but it's difficult when you're making it up as you go along. Right. So that's really what I'm going to go and do. I'm going to go and pick out all of these details with the lighter magenta that we've just mixed. And where's that guy with the arm crease that we've been using? Was it this guy? I've been doing this over the course of a few days. It's the school summer holidays, so the time that I get where the house is quiet to do some recording is few and far between. So yeah, while this is like, I don't know, a 20-minute video, for me it's several days. So I'm going to pick out these highlights. Yeah. Try and bring this down. So really, you want to follow the edge of that cloth. And then in the cases of like these particular figures, it's really difficult because there's no real detail in this cloth at the back. There we go. So I'm going to have to be quite bold and go all over almost, which is a bit of a shame. And you can tell actually just how thin this magenta still is, even with the mix with the bleach bone. I'm using the word a lot. So there we go. I will crack on with all of this, try and get this all done and brought up to speed. And there's only a couple of stages left, and the last one should hide a multitude of sins. Right, so I'm not going to butcher that anymore. Give me a sec and I will see you in probably a few days' time. There we go. So it might not look the best at the moment, but I don't have a huge amount of detail on these figures to really work with. So that's the upturned sort of coat there. You can see on the guy's arm. There we are. So I've tried picking out those details a little bit. On the back it is difficult. I'm trying to leave a bit of a patch here where it sort of dips in. So the next thing we want to do is, again, going back to the magenta and the ivory, is I want to mix up a slightly lighter shade than I did previously. So bear with me just a sec. Just want to make sure my brush has got a suitable point to it. So I want a little bit more of the Screaming Skull, a little bit of the magenta here. It's probably a little bit too light. Let's grab. Right, that might do for the time being. So now what we want to do is be super precise with where we want to apply these paints, this shade. So I'm just going to pick out the very tops of these folds here, like so. In the case of these sort of upturns, I can edge highlight effectively and pick out the tops of these folds along like the cuff here, along the bottom. I've actually mixed up quite a thin layer here, so you might find that easier to work with, but be careful if you're trying to do fine detail with a really, really thin paint mixture, because it can then just sort of go everywhere, ruin it. So in actual fact, I'm going to add a little bit more bleach bone in there, Screaming Skull, showing my age. Right, and just pick out like the edges, really. So a lot of this is going to be edge highlighting that you're going to be familiar with doing other things, and you can use the side of the brush to edge highlight, like so. It mucks it up a little bit, but that's underside, I don't care. So it's a pretty easy way of edge highlighting things. So you don't have to do a huge amount on this stage, because we just want to pick out really, really minute bits of detail. I might drag these down a little bit more. Maybe put a couple of... Now, if you are wanting to apply detail to a piece of cloth that let's face it, there's nothing here to highlight. It's just almost one flat surface. I've found that if you really get, there's hardly any paint on this brush now. I want to do a couple of diagonal lines like this. Right, can you see? Is it in focus? There we are. And then in the opposite direction, do some more. I've lost focus again. There we are. So I don't know. I'm trying to represent the sort of cloth, the texture. Again, it's not going to be that loosely woven, but it kind of allows you to highlight a flat area without actually having anything to really highlight. So I'm going to crack on and do this, and I will see you in a sec. There we go. So that's what you're going to have with that final layer of highlighting. Now you could go one step further and just use the Screaming Skull as it is to pick out like the very edge of the corner, maybe the very edge of the elbow crease here. Entirely up to you. Now the next thing I want to do is blend these shades all together as well as I can do, and I'm going to mix up my own wash effectively. So you can just water down the paint you used as the mid layer. So in this case, obviously the Warlock Purple, if it could get any thinner. But rather than simply using water, I'm going to use the Lahmian medium, the technical paint. So if you were to make your own washes by diluting the paint with water, I don't think it dries very well. The Lahmian medium, I think, has been designed to do exactly that. So it is worth investing in if you're going to make up a lot of your own washes. So with this, it is worth grabbing some of this technical paint first before you get the magenta on your bristles. Otherwise, you're going to discolour the whole of the Lahmian medium. And I'm going to mix it together, just so you can see at the bottom. Pretty thin now. Right, so it's almost equal parts with this because the coat d'arms paint was already pretty thin, and we're just going to apply this as a wash, as we would anything else. It also brings the colour back out. So the bleach bone, the Screaming Skull stage rather, that has muted the shade, which might work. That might be what you're after. But I want to try and bring the colours back into this. I've lost focus, apologies. So we're just going to apply it all over, pretty straightforward. It's not going to fix all of the problems with especially like the backs of these cloaks where, it's not the greatest of highlighting here. There you go. Just lost focus there for quite a bit. So yeah, it's not going to fix all of the sins with some of these this shading on the back, but it works quite nicely when you've got like creases in arms and what have you. And where's my go-to figure here? So it should blend these quite nicely together and also restore that pigment. So that's really it. That's my technique for painting magenta. I actually have handily a figure that I finished the other day. Let me just wash that out. So that's what the magenta is like when it's all dry. So it blends it together quite nicely. It's one of those things, I think it's good from a distance, it will do. So that's my magenta technique. If you've enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. It does support the channel. And if you've got any suggestions with what I could try and do next, if you need help with, let me know in the comment section. But until next time, take care.